Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar that we are holding for Federation in conversation with Karen Katzman, our Director of Israel Work. Today continues another challenging day in the Middle East and in Israel. And we'll get to it in a second, but just a few minutes ago, Karen Katzman needed to go to the bomb shelter for the most recent missile attack on central Israel. We're gathering today in these challenging times to both understand what is going on and the needs in Israel and a potential response of what we can do as the Washington Jewish community. In the midst of this, our friends and family in Israel are running to shelters, addressing critical needs in their families, and trying to figure out how life can go on as they seek to live in peace within a very challenging Middle East. On Monday, we shared news with the community that Federation allocated an initial grant of $250,000 to address the most critical needs. Now, this is just the beginning, because what we do at Federation, what we do together as a community, is to really understand what is going on, what are the needs of people on the ground in Israel, and how can we most effectively support them and ensure the continued strength and vibrancy of our friends and family and of Israel. Those $250,000, that initial grant, will be used to address the most critical needs and to make sure that we are following up on our commitment to Israel. This builds on our long-term and historic connection that we have had, and really sets an initial benchmark of what we are looking to do. Today, we're going to be in conversation with Karen Katzman to understand what the needs are, what we are seeing, and what some of the possibilities might be. A lot of times when we read the news, we get abstracts, we get basic ideas. It's hard to tell really what is going on. And at times we get reports of this or that that may suggest one kind of need or another. The benefit of Federation is that we are on the ground 24/7, that we have a key staff member working with partners and others in Israel to understand what is going on, not just what we see from the superficial news or reports, but really what are the needs of the population in Israel where we can make a difference. Before we dive into the conversation, just a couple of technical notes. So first of all, for those people who want closed captioning, please push the bottom at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We're also going to be recording this webinar for distribution to the community later on. Throughout this conversation, there's also a Q&A feature. If you have questions that you would like to raise and that you would like us to discuss as we move forward, please put them in the Q&A function at the bottom, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can over the course of this conversation. I'm thrilled to be joined this morning by Karen Katzman, Director of our Israel office. Karen has worked with our Federation for 25 years, and as I noted, lives in Israel and is a true partner and colleague, one whom I've gotten to know very well over the past many years, and whom I trust implicitly in understanding what is going on in Israel due to her deep relationships, due to her deep understanding, and her pushing on the issues to understand what lies underneath. She has developed relationships over the years with national organizations, with local community organizations, with hospitals, you name it. She understands what is going on and has really helped strengthen Federation's work in Israel. We asked Karen to join us today to really understand a couple of different things. So first of all, really what it means to be in Israel right now, and we will start off with that in a second. And second, a conversation about where the most urgent needs are emerging in Israel. As I noted, Karen is in constant contact with our partners on the ground during this crisis and brings a usually very calm and broad perspective, though I do want to note, and we'll start off with a second with just what happened over the past half hour with Karen. So first of all, welcome Karen to the conversation.
Shalom, Gil. Thank you.
So as we start, can you just say a little bit what the last half hour was like for you and to frame some of the dynamic of what it's like living in Israel today?
Absolutely. Toda, Gil. Thank you. So, hi to everyone. Shalom. Yeah, just about 20 minutes ago, as we were doing a test to make sure that all the video and the systems and the audio were working well, I received a siren. And luckily, I have a safe room in my home and just had to go into the safe room, which is just a few meters away from my office. But if that does happen during our call, and there's of course a chance that that could happen, I'll tell you kind of how it works here. Generally, if the missiles are coming from Iran, we have some advance notice. So we get on our cell phones, we get a notice saying that in the next few minutes, alerts are expected in your area, and you need to find a better location that will provide protection. So what happens is, in most cases, if we get an alert like that, it does eventually, within the next 5 or 10 minutes, turn into a siren. And then I have about 90 seconds where I live in Israel to be able to move to the shelter. We need to remain there for sometimes even 10 minutes or even longer if there are other missiles that come in concurrently. So if that happens, I will disconnect my laptop and I will take you on a tour with me on a walk a few meters to the other side of the place where I am, and you'll be able to experience in some way, at least virtually, what it feels like to be under a siren and in a shelter.
So I understand though, Karen, that there were also some missiles that were shot today from Lebanon, however.
Right. So that's an entirely different situation. And we've had that a few times where we actually don't get any advanced warning. It happened for the first time, I think it was yesterday when I was standing with my family in the kitchen and the siren went off and we all said, wait, but we didn't get an alert. How's that possible? And kind of gotten used to the standard of getting an alert. And then all of a sudden we all said no, then that must mean that that's coming from Lebanon because we don't have that advanced warning. So then you really only have 90 seconds in order to get into your shelter. Um,
So
yeah,
can you say a little bit more about, what life is like right now in Israel, what it's been like over the past week since the fighting with Iran has started. What is daily life like? How has it changed from what it was before?
sure, absolutely. So I guess for weeks, um, Israelis had kind of been waiting for the other shoe to drop. So ironically, there was almost a sense of relief when things began. And as I'm saying those words, I can't believe that I'm actually even saying that I was relieved when the attack started, because it's actually kind of a crazy thing to say. But in a way, the anticipation had almost been, I can't say maybe worse, but certainly it was not a pleasant thing not knowing how you could plan anything. You couldn't plan a trip, you couldn't plan to go abroad, you couldn't plan anything really in your daily lives because you just didn't know if you'd find yourself where we are today. It sounds maybe kind of cliche, but Israelis truly are resilient, and we definitely saw that over the past 2 years. Some of you may have seen on social media the clips of Israelis celebrating Purim in the shelters. I saw a clip today that there was even a wedding in an underground shelter in a garage. So, I mean, where in the world can you have something like that? The civilian population has a lot of experience and knows how to behave in such crisis situations. And I can say, even sadly, the youngest children know how to behave. I can share with you that yesterday I have four grandchildren. The eldest is 9, and they were at our house for a few hours yesterday. And siren went off. It actually went off a couple of times when they were there. And the youngest, who's 3 years old, was taking a nap elsewhere in the house. And the second the siren went off, just very calmly, everybody knew where to go. But it was interesting how the three older kids, and the older I'm talking about 6 years old, 7 years old, immediately started asking, "Where's Eitan? We have to get Eitan. Where is he?" And they were each one knew his role and knew what they had to do in order to move into the shelter. We're all on the front lines, and that's one of the different things that we've seen over the last couple of years. Is there's no place in Israel, and you can go from Metula up north down to Eilat, where Israelis, and here I have to stop and say that when I say Israelis, it's not just Jewish Israelis, it's Arab Israelis as well, living in Israel where people aren't impacted. Um, the brunt this time is in central Israel, the Gush Down area and the Jerusalem outskirts, as well as northern Israel, as we mentioned from Hezbollah. And maybe a little bit later, we'll talk about why that's the case. Yeah, I can just share with you also really kind of what's different and what the sense
Yeah,
is this
please.
time. So Israel has called up now 110,000 reservists, including one of my sons who was called up and is supposed to go in tomorrow. But thank God this time they aren't really in combat. I'm not talking about the pilots and the brave pilots and the first responders who obviously are in intense combat situations. But we don't have a situation where most of our children, spouses, neighbors, friends are actually in intense combat fighting in the Gaza Strip. And I think that combined with the fact that we don't have hostages in Gaza as well, to some degree has lowered the stress levels for people. I think that's a huge change right now. Schools and businesses, like last time, are not operating. We can only take kids to play outside if we're near a shelter where we can reach within a minute, minute and a half. Some parents are working remotely, or working in jobs that provide essential services, and at the same time are kind of trying to keep their own kids busy. There's lots of cooking, there's lots of stress eating. We also don't know how, this time, and maybe it was similar, I guess, a little bit to last time, where we don't know how long this is going to last. And very often you know how things start, but you don't always know how they develop and how they're going to end. So while there are certainly encouraging signs of success right now, people are beginning after a week to ask themselves how long this is going to keep continuing.
So within that context of people needing to stay very close to their home, businesses and schools being shut down, obviously we've seen the destruction that these missiles can cause. And I do want to note that for people who may have been more familiar with the other rockets, either from Gaza or from Lebanon, the Iranian ballistic missiles are a completely different animal. And I think it's just important to understand that when one hits, it can destroy 25 buildings. It's not simply a room or whatever, and the damage is much more significant. So within that context, what are you seeing as the most, important urgent needs that you're hearing from our partners and friends on the ground?
Sure, certainly. So as you mentioned, and probably many of you, most of you saw the pictures that came out from Tel Aviv and from Beit Shemesh. Those are really, really difficult pictures to see. When you have a direct hit, and we can see it from our shelters, many of us on our cell phones, on televisions, and you see the people emerging in the minutes after the attack. And what we saw were people coming out in shock, holding babies. Um, helping elderly people leave their apartments, holding their dogs, holding huge dogs and pets coming out, and people were sobbing. It's a very different, very, very difficult thing to see. And that's, as you mentioned, it's not only, on buildings that obviously have direct hits, but in Tel Aviv the other night, it was the entire block where homes were just destroyed. And I think the number is that there's 1,500 Israelis are not able to go back to their homes, both in Tel Aviv and in Beit Shemesh. What I'm hearing from our partners is that I think the biggest need right now is to keep um, people who are living in the shelters comfortable, safe, and occupied. We have a partner in the north that we began supporting, I guess it was almost 2 years ago, through the funds raised by the community, the generous donations from the community to the Kinneret Valley cluster, which is a cluster of 15 municipalities in around the Lake Kinneret, the Tiberias area. It's populations of Druze, Arab Israeli, Jewish, Bedouins living in the 15 municipalities in that area. And these are communities that have very diverse, but also very vulnerable populations living there. There are many issues that were not obviously, there wasn't time and there weren't resources to address since the last conflict, such as building of new shelters, renovations of new shelters, which are the responsibility of the government of Israel to do that. At that time in the past conflict, our federation responded in an unbelievable and unprecedented way. I'd be happy if you'd like, Gil, for me to share some of my impressions from then, and I know that you visited the area with me and can speak about them as well.
Well, so when you talked a little bit about the Poria Hospital, which is a hospital up north, what are the like just to go one level into particular, what are the challenges that they are facing at this moment to take it kind of into some more detail? Like how is the larger fighting and dynamic that's occurring, in terms of the missiles and needing to be close to home, schools and businesses being shut down? How is that impacting, like Poria Hospital and the people who are there?
Right, absolutely. So the role of the hospitals now is, first of all, to protect life, to protect lives of, God forbid, people who are injured and arrive there, whether they be in small events or mass casualties. Um, and of course, to continue to provide essential medical services for the population, which you would need to provide in normal times. And while doing that, to safeguard the most vulnerable populations, Korea Hospital, which is located in the periphery in the north, responded unbelievably in July of 2024 when, as you may remember, a rocket struck a soccer field in the Druze town of Majd al-Shams in the Golan Heights, and 12 Druze children were killed, and at least 42 others were injured. Many of them were taken to that hospital, to Perea, for life-saving treatment in the trauma unit, a unit which has only 2 beds and is not really equipped for mass casualty. So I know the doctor of the trauma unit. He actually is oftentimes happens in Israel. Everyone knows, kind of knows everyone. The unit's director, Dr. Barak Levit, and my son served together in a medevac unit. And I became aware of the needs that they have, that their supplies were dwindling, the equipment they needed to replenish and to make sure that they had enough supplies and equipment to be able to take care of patients should they come in again, God forbid, such as happened in July of 2024. And what's happening right now is these hospitals are preparing for those events. Now, they're doing so, and you have to remember that the staff there is working 24/7. They're right now working 12-hour shifts on and 12-hour shifts off. And remember that many of these nurses and doctors and essential workers in those hospitals, they have spouses who are in reserves, or in jobs that they need to be out of the home, and they themselves oftentimes are parents and have children who need to have daycare solutions, to need to be cared for during the day. So these people are coming to work under extremely, not only professionally challenging situations, but also having to care and think about their personal situations and as well. And what they're doing in the Poria and some of the other hospitals here is that they're setting up daycare facilities to take care of the children at the hospital. Federation has supported that in the past, and that's actually one of the current needs right now that they've reached out to us to support, to be able to keep the teams working on a 24/7 basis and keep their families safe as well.
Thanks. Before we move to another part of the country, just to give another sense of flavor, can you talk a little bit about um, what the Jewish Agency's Victim of Terror Fund does? And you noted how 1,500 people have been displaced and can't
Mhm.
go out, and just a little bit about what that is in terms of a global response to the people who've been impacted by these attacks.
Absolutely. So, as you can imagine, when something happens like that, and I, spoke a little bit about, them just coming out with the clothes on their backs from the apartments that had been hit, from the buildings where they were residing, they have nothing with them whatsoever, and very often they're relocated, just for the night or until they can move to their families or other places for the longer term. They need essential things, whether it be just a toothbrush or clothing or diapers for their children or anything to help them for the first 24 hours. And the Jewish Agency Victims of Terror Fund provides a stipend and it's transferred to them immediately. People actually go out into the field and wherever they are, whether they be in the hotels or wherever it is that they're residing, and actually give them vouchers where they can go to places nearby or to provide them with essential things. And it's something that's really meaningful to them in the first hours.
Thank you. I want to switch to kind of a different part of the country, just so we can all understand, like, what is the dynamic. Um, After October 7th, we developed a relationship, a partnership with Kibbutz Re'im, which is right alongside the Gaza border. Can you say a little bit? I mean, so they may not be in the primary, line of fire right now, but how is the fighting impacting those kinds of communities as well when we think about Israel being a relatively small country? It's really just a few hours, from one major city to another, and from the north to the south. So how is Kibbutz Re'im playing a role in this context? In the midst of all this fighting.
So this is really a good point to talk about some of the trauma that people are experiencing here. And it's not only the trauma of, all of us, as you can imagine, at some level, having to run in the middle of the night or situations of just, this crazy way that we've been living of running to shelters 24/7. But you can imagine how triggering these missiles are and the sirens are for people who live in the Gaza envelope. And among them are friends and our partners at Kibbutz Re'im. And I'm in touch with them often, almost on a daily basis. And the people that I speak with talk about that, and they talk about it not only for the adults who, just went through and they're still living, many of them, the trauma from the past 2 years, but you can imagine how triggering these missiles are. And again, with their children having to run to shelters, many of these people in Re'im as well spent 18, 20 hours in a shelter on October 7th with children, with no water, with no electricity, under very, very difficult circumstances until the IDF was able to get to them and to safely evacuate those who were still alive. And the situation is extremely triggering. By the way, I've spoken to other partners of ours, our friends from who were with the Nova Festival tribe, the families of the survivors, of course, themselves from that horrific day, the families of those who lost their lives, the families of the survivors. For each one of them, it's an extremely triggering moment, bringing them back to things that many of them had really wanted to forget.
So I guess, I mean, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that because especially after October 7th, we spent a lot of time and put a lot of resources not only into, rehabilitation and helping people who were injured, but also trauma relief. And we know kind of Israeli society has been dealing with a lot of, um, kind of PTSD kind of across a wide swath. How do you see that? You talked about the Nova Tribe, which is really focused on those people who are at the Nova Festival. Have you been hearing other things in terms of the trauma needs, particularly in this moment, that are rising, given the past 3 years, what happened on October 7th, the two and a
Mhm.
half years of war with Hamas, and kind of all the other fighting that was going on. I mean, are you hearing other things, whether from hospitals or colleagues or others, about what is going on in terms of trauma in Israel?
Yeah, that is the biggest story, having nothing to do even with this war, which added, I'm sure, another layer of trauma to all the, what's happening and where how people are feeling. But the mental health issue is the major issue, continuing, for the past 2.5 years, and will likely continue within Israeli society in the years ahead. The statistics are that, and I was recently at a conference on mental health in Tel Aviv just about 2 weeks ago. 15% of the population have been diagnosed, formally diagnosed with PTSD, and the remainder of the population, the majority of those, are not necessarily formally diagnosed with PTSD, but have experienced and are still experiencing some level of trauma. I think two of the biggest needs right now, and Federation was right at the beginning, understood this. And again, really because we are out there on the ground, learning, researching topics before we just go ahead and, allocate the Israel Crisis Committee, Allocations Committee, ICRA, which did an amazing job of allocating the generous funds that had been raised by the community immediately after October 7th. The way that the committee worked at the time was, before, working on a subject, whether it be trauma, whether it be economic development or rebuilding or whatever that topic was, is we brought to the committee experts in that field. And one of the first topics that we took on was mental health. And so we learned that the biggest need at that time and still now is to train mental health professionals. Israel right now has 9 psychiatrists for 100,000 Israelis, which is one of the lowest in the OECD countries. You don't need only psychiatrists. You need individuals who are guidance counselors at school, principals, school teachers, physicians, pediatricians, people working in the community centers, all kinds of Israelis throughout in the community here to be trained and certified in treating, in identifying, and also treating trauma. So Federation did invest heavily in that, and that still is an area that requires a lot of investment.
Thank you. We're going to start transitioning to some of the questions that people sent us in advance. If people in the audience have further questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to them. So we're going to start with one that that someone raised, which is, how does the view in Israel towards the United States today compare to pre-October 7th?
Wow. So that's a good one. Good question. Look, Israelis, and I know that I'm following the news in the States and don't even want to go there in terms of the discussions about how and what and decisions are made. But I can tell you that Israelis, both after October 7th, were extremely appreciative of the support that we received then, and really feel right now that Israel is with us, that the United States is with us now. And I think feel really strengthened by the decision to move ahead and really to hopefully change the trajectory of our future. When you think about it, I think most Israelis, or conversations that I'm having with my friends, we really feel that it's very difficult to continue the way that we've been continuing. And we know that, it's not only Iran, but it's actually Iran's proxies, whether it be Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis or whomever, have been making our lives very difficult for so many years here in Israel, that has to end at some point. And I think we're very appreciative of the United States working together with Israel to take on what is not an easy thing to take on.
Okay. Um, Another question, very different kind of question, is really people want to know what they can do to help. What is the best way to stay informed about what's going on? Maybe getting behind some of the headlines, but any advice on what people can do either to help or to really stay informed about what's happening in Israel?
So, first of all, to help, and I have to say, I bet I'm sure that a lot of the people who are on this webinar have friends, have family in Israel, and I really mean it when I say that they appreciate. I know that I do when you reach out, and sometimes we can't answer all of the text messages or emails that we get, other than just to, with a little check or something, or to say thank you. But it really means a lot to know that we're not alone and that you're thinking of us. And secondly, I know you mentioned, Gil, that Federation has now, began allocating some funds. We are, as we did in the previous allocation way that we were working with allocations, again, are working extremely strategically, really understanding the needs to make sure that there are needs that are real needs, that there aren't duplication of services. There are a lot of NGOs on every topic, whether it be mental health, whether it be rebuilding, whether it be economic development, whatever it is. There are tens and tens and tens of NGOs. That may be a conversation for a whole other day of how that is working. And there are also a lot of resources out there, both from generous gifts from the Federation system, from foundations, from private donors. And the challenge now is to make sure that those resources meet the real needs in the field, and they do it in real time. So you don't have a situation where handful of organizations that have, people know their names, are receiving, bulk of funding, but they have so much funding that they just simply can't get it out into the field. And I think that's one of the things that Federation here and all of you should be really proud of, is to know that, we really check and double check and triple check to make sure that funds get out to the people who really need them, and get out and get out quickly. I can give an example, Gil, maybe just the example at KBC of the shelter that can share with everyone that very much at the beginning of the war, the Kinneret Valley Cluster, our partner in the north, absorbed within a 48-hour period 25,000 evacuees from the northern border, mostly in the area of Kiryat Shmona. Just to give you an idea, that would be akin to a county or a town absorbing an entire city. Okay, my town that I live in has 20,000 residents, so it would be absorbing a whole other town within 48 hours. Education needs, welfare needs, all kinds of security needs, health needs of all this population. They just showed up. And it was amazing to see how that happened, and how the 15 mayors worked together in order to make that happen. And I had heard about this situation, and interestingly, though, as I mentioned, there was just so much, going on maybe in southern Israel, and organizations and funds kind of going, supporting things all over Israel, but no one was supporting those evacuees there and what had happened in that cluster and in Tiberias. And a friend of mine put me in touch with somebody by the name of Dror Lalush, who's the CEO of the cluster. And I spoke with him, and he just said to me, I said to him, "What's your most urgent need?" And he said, "You know what, Karen? The staff is working out of a headquarters, out of our offices." And he said, "We have the staff that came with them from Kiryat Shmona, and we have our staff here in the cluster. But we don't have a shelter anywhere near where we can get to it and there they have less than a minute and a half. They have something like half a minute to get to a shelter. So people are working from home or they're not even coming to the office because we can't work. So how are you supposed to manage basically two cities when you have your staff working remotely all over the place?" And he said, "I need a shelter." And I conveyed that immediately to the crisis committee from the Federation. Literally within hours, we made that happen. And I had sent pictures at the time, and some of you may have seen them because they were posted on Federation's website, that at midnight one night, a crane showed up and literally dropped this temporary shelter there outside the door, adjacent to the door of the office, which allowed the staff to continue to give essential services. And Gil, you may want to share that you actually had the honor of, I think shortly after, several weeks later, you were in Israel. We were in Israel together. You came and we went up to the region there, and you placed the mezuzah of that shelter. And there's a big sign that says on the shelter, "Thank you to the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington."
I do want to kind of elevate a couple of things, Karen, that you just said. I mean, first of all, um, obviously the context in Israel continues to evolve. The needs are significant and varied, and there are a lot of different organizations in Israel. Some are very well known, some may not be well known. And one of the things that we do so well, is, Karen, with your leadership, is to understand both the needs in Israel as they change and the capacity of this wide array of organizations serving Israelis. And one of the things that we do is really think very carefully about that. What resources, what are the needs, and how do we match that? We're also very focused. One of the things that we've been working on, especially since October 7th and over the past year or so, is strengthening the ties of Washington area Jews to Israeli organizations, particularly through local synagogues and other organizations. And as we are approaching this, we're also trying to understand what are the needs of those partners in Israel who are working with our local organizations as a way to help them out and make thoughtful decisions. And where they may be up north in Haifa where there were attacks, they may be in central Israel, there may be other parts, and really trying to have an impact and address the most urgent needs in Israel while strengthening the ties that we have with Israel and Israelis. And that is a key part of what we are doing, always trying to understand how do we make sure that the resources that we have already and those that people contribute to this go to address the most critical needs that we are facing in Israel. I have another question, which is also very different. And so you mentioned that one of your sons has been called up. There have been recent reports that Israel has told the population in southern Lebanon to go north of the Litani River, which is kind of a river several miles into Lebanon. Um, I mean, I know you're not a security expert, and we're not asking you to do that, but to people, it sounds like Israel will be sending soldiers into Lebanon. Again, is that kind of what people are hearing and assuming in Israel, or is it more to telling people to go north to limit some of the casualties?
Yeah, it's obviously something that we're concerned about here. We are hearing that in the media in the last day or two. And they're continuing, as I said, there's been 110,000 called up, and they're continuing to grow that number. What, some people are saying, and it's very difficult to know, is that it's just to show presence, and that there won't be a ground incursion. I don't think there's an appetite for that here within Israel right now, certainly after so many years of prolonged conflict and casualties. But we're certainly prepared for that. And you know how things start, and you really just don't know how they develop. And not only in Lebanon, by the way, I have my kids have friends, and I've know people who have been called up to the West Bank and to the Gaza envelope to serve there as well. There's a sense that we want to just keep all of our borders calm and safe, and to have a presence on the borders so that if anyone is even thinking about, um, changing the current situation in those areas, that they will think twice about it.
Okay. There was one very specific question in terms of understanding um, in the aggregate the number of wounded that people are talking about. What are the reports within Israel? And I don't know if you know off the top of your head, both the number of people. I think we've seen in terms of the number
Yeah.
of people killed. Obviously, Bet Shemesh was a disaster with so many people killed. Are there reports about the number of people
Yeah.
who have been wounded, just to give a sense of the magnitude?
Yeah, the number that's being reported is 914 have been injured, and of course 12 that are casualties. That's a huge number within a week. Um, Obviously not all are seriously injured, but sometimes, these are injuries that are unfortunately not just scrapes and scratches. Yeah. And that's again, that I want to stress again that that's the physical injuries. Okay, we have to always, when we talk about the physical injuries, we have to talk about the mental trauma affecting people who are, the ones who are most affected, the families, first circle, second, third circle, and third circle.
Thank you. So Karen, first of all, I really want to thank you for taking the time. I know these are
Thank
not
you.
easy times, and doing the work that you do in the midst of having to listen for alerts and sirens and care for your kids and grandchildren and try to figure out, how we can most effectively support Israel at this moment is very significant and truly heroic. So we just wanted to thank you for being here. Also grateful that that seems to be,
Yeah,
at least for now, some quiet.
right.
I shouldn't have said that. I apologize. That was kind of, I'm going to bring
Right.
bad luck now. But hopefully you and your family and everyone, in Israel stay safe, and that this war will kind of end, soon and successfully, and that there can be peace that comes to Israel and the Middle East after all of this. And so I really wanted to thank you for everything that you do and what you've done for this community in Israel for so many years.
Thank you, Gil, and thank you to everybody here on the call. Thank you for all that you do, for caring, for your support, and in every way that you're involved. And hopefully, we will meet again to talk about happier things. And there are many of those taking place in Israel as well.
There are.
So,
It's important to see the pictures of that wedding, even if it's in the bomb shelter.
right.
I now would like to invite Daniel Raskis, who is Federation's Vice President for Israel and Overseas, to join us and help bring what we are hearing, from Karen to our local community and bring us to a close. So thank you for everything that you do, Daniel, and I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. And I also want to echo the thanks to Karen. As Karen, I have two daughters who are living in Jerusalem currently. One has a safe room, one does not, and we are vicariously participating in some of the alerts we continue to get from those regions. So it's not the same as being there, but we're experiencing some of it with you. So thank you for all that you do. I want to help wrap the conversation by just going back a little bit to some of the themes that Gil mentioned at the outset. So first, I think Federation, hopefully you have a sense from this conversation that Federation is uniquely positioned to really help in these moments of crisis, to help our community support needs in Israel. And the reason why Federation is positioned that way is because of all the years of investment in building relationships that Karen and others have done, and the partnerships that we've established over the last 3 years post October 7th in the allocation work that we've done on behalf of the Washington Jewish community. And hopefully that gives everyone in the community a sense that we as a community are standing up and doing our part to try to help in these times of immense need in Israel. There's a second aspect to what we are doing as well, and Gil referred to this a few minutes ago, and that's really to think more deeply and to act around the connections that people have across our community in Israel. Meaning that we have the benefit of having many Jewish organizations throughout the Washington Jewish community. There are synagogues, there are schools, there are human service organizations, there are young adult organizations, and all of them have membership that have potential existing ties and potential deeper ties to Israel. And one of the things that we have seen post October 7th is how important the breadth and depth of those ties are to Israel's future and also to the vibrancy of our own community here. And so in thinking about that, we are now asking ourselves not only how can we support our existing partners in Israel from Federation standpoint, but how can Federation uniquely in its role as a community convener help all of these organizations really amplify the work that they are doing with their membership to help in Israel. And so we are asking that question and talking to those synagogues and agencies and other community organizations so that we can figure out how Federation can help. And we're thinking about that help around three dimensions. One, to help strategically think about what those connections to be. Two, to help operationally with the resources that we have on the ground to support those connections across the community. And finally, financially, to figure out where we can lean in with the resources that we've raised on behalf of the community to really deepen and broaden those ties. And we know ultimately that if we can succeed in deepening and broadening the ties across the community to Israel, that will be to the benefit of our own community in terms of our own strength and vibrancy, but will also help with all the immense needs that are arising through the crisis. So hopefully that gives you some sense of what we're doing, and we welcome, of course, the input from those of you who are engaged in that way in your own communities across Washington, D.C. So thank you. And Gil, I think I turned back to you or we close from here.
Thank you, Daniel. And thank you everyone for joining us. As we noted, this has been recorded and we will be sending it out to the community. If you have any questions that you would like, please reach out and we will make sure to follow up with you, both in terms of the needs in Israel, the work that Federation is doing in Israel, and as we go forward. So again, thank you everyone and have a good day today. And we will speak to you soon. Thank you.